Welcome. Come in. Don't be scared. At least, not yet. I was just finishing up my siesta when you arrived. All this madness and mayhem can be exhausting sometimes. Where did the time go? I better check on my 3 occupants inside these harvest chambers. I'm sure they're already on their own permanent siestas. We'll check in on them after I share a tale that will delay your own siesta plans. It's an intimidating import about a man running away from his deadly past, only to find himself ripe for a pickin' present. Gather around. Close your eyes, open your imagination, and listen to the story called Something in the Strawberry Fields.
The heat was monstrous. Workers toiled beneath the high sun like figures of clay that harden and crack. They wore old, long-sleeved cotton to protect from the scalding rays, so that sweat streamed down their foreheads and necks to soak at the collars. Muddy sneakers wrapped their feet, and stained gloves covered their hands, and faded headgear bound their heads. Passerbys, looking across the fields, might only see bobbing Dodgers caps or wide-brimmed cowboy hats with twisted, frayed edges, dipping up and down over the strawberry plants like little boats in a sea of red and green. Like the others, Luis did not speak as he labored, but silently cursed and blistered and endured. The sun stole his energy slowly, like a canny pickpocket, so he did not notice the loss until it was gone and too late. His back and knees became a cold black iron, heavy and without feeling. In the morning his bones howled in complaint as he crouched for hours and hours. But by afternoon, he felt nothing, just a metal fusion of stiff bolts and beams. He picked strawberries from the ground and placed them into a large bushel. Then, he stood with a mighty creak and carried the bushel to the counter and had it weighed. He brought his empty bushel back to the fields and picked from the ground again. He performed this routine from 7 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. The harvesters worked 6 days a week with only Sundays off. Luis made little money, but he had few responsibilities either, so he got by. Some of the men had families to support, and Luis could not imagine how they provided the means to raise so many niños. His thoughts drifted as he plucked the strawberries one by one. Lost in thought, Luis reached down and pulled one, and he felt the plant grasp his hand and pull back, trying to yank him into the worlds far underneath the earth.
Aye.
Startled, he let go of the plant and fell backwards, shaking his head.
¿Qué pasó?
Joe, his cousin, called to him from the next row.
Nada. The temperature is getting to me.
He stared at the plant, then quickly grabbed the same glimmering strawberry and pulled it again. It popped off its leafy stalk with ease, as had all the thousands of others Luis had picked that week. Joe went back to working, and Luis glanced at the other men around them, quietly harvesting at their own patches of strawberry heaven, bent rigidly over on hands and knees. Luis resumed plucking under the summer sun and soon fell back into his methodic routine. His muscles were knots of cramped stone, toiling duly, replaying the same motions. His bushel measured only half full. He let his mind drift again, this time to the chupacabra. Luis had moved to Portero at the bottom of California 4 weeks ago, and only recently obtained work harvesting strawberries through Joe. The two of them grew up together a few miles across the Mexican border in Tecate, east of the crossing at Tijuana and San Diego. Joe had lived in Portero already for several months, and he told Luis of strange events that began to transpire. In recent weeks, neighboring farms were discovering livestock slaughtered and drained of blood. Goats and cows, limbless and lifeless, were uncovered under shallow mounds of dirt and crops. The laborers spoke solemnly of signs and superstitions, and more than one man shared tales told him long ago from an abuela in her rocking chair that the chupacabra had returned. The chupacabra was a story Luis knew well since his boyhood. It was said to be a spirit in the form of an upright creature, described as a coyote that walked like a man, with spines erupting from its back and giant black eyes like saucers of ink. Like all mythical creatures, its physical characteristics varied greatly according to the storyteller, as did its ferocity and unnatural powers. Some thought it to be a misplaced soul, while others claimed it a vengeful demon. The chupacabra could carry children away in the night, or it could punish the ungodly, or it could attend any deed that people imagined. Those people being parents and preachers who spoke of the creature in low voices, prophesizing behind candlelight. In its latest manifestation, the chupacabra seemed to be haunting the lands outlying Portero. Last night it emerged again and fed on 2 sheep, which were found on a neighboring farm down the road. Their animal carcasses were discovered, woolly bundles of visceral gore buried under stalks of asparagus. One of the workers said that the chupacabra was searching for something. To Luis, the chupacabra was only Mexico's vision of Bigfoot. The afternoon grew late, and Luis continued picking strawberries, rows and endless rows of the leafy flora. His eyes began to emblazon with visions of ruby-red fruit speckled by yellow-black seeds.
Oh!
Again, a leafy plant seemed to grasp his hand when he was not paying attention, and tried to pull him under the earth.
Madre de Dios!
Aquí! Excited voices clamored, and Luis joined the laborers rushing to an unpicked patch of strawberry crop a quarter-acre away. Another corpse had been found, buried by mounds of leafy vines. However, this was not the corpse of an animal, but the skeletal figure of a man, stiff and desiccated, strawberries growing out from his hollow eye sockets. One of the harvesters pulled off the clumped plants, trailing heady brown roots. The cadaver was fully revealed, that of a mid-sized man, fleshless from rot. Matted black hair ringed its withered skull, and one lower tooth gleamed of gold. The body was dressed in denim pants and denim jacket, a Texas tuxedo, which were rancid with decay and dirt. The dead man wore also white-spotted cowboy boots, snakeskin, with silver metal tips across the toes and large silver buckles over each instep. The buckles had initials engraved in calligraphy upon them, the letters M.G. Luis knew those initials well. Miguel Garcia. The man he killed.
Fuel chupacabra.
One of the men announced quietly, and performed the sign of the cross over his chest. Joe and Luis and several of the other workers walked to the nearby burger grill. The police allowed the harvesters to leave. None of them were suspects, but were lightly questioned. Did anyone know the dead man? No. Did anyone notice anything suspicious? No. The police closed the strawberry fields for 48 hours to search the grounds for evidence. Luis nodded and looked around at Joe and the other harvesters.
See, it was El Chupacabra.
No, that was no chupacabra, Luis. I thought you didn't believe in such things.
I believe in what I see.
No seas tonto. That was a skeleton. You all saw it. Whoever he was has been dead for a long time.
I don't have much of an appetite right now. I think I'm going to head home instead.
Te comprendo. I don't either, but I think we should eat something. It's been a long day.
Nah, I'll see you back at the apartment.
Está bien. Adiós.
Hasta luego.
Stunning turn, ICE tells her she is in fact being deported in July and must return to the ICE office with a ticket back to Mexico.
Alone at the apartment, Luis thought of Miguel Garcia, a festering skeletal corpse in the strawberry fields in Portero. A man who appeared to be dead for many years. A man Luis encountered last only a month ago, while at home in Tecate.
Luis Fernando Castillo?
Sí? Yo soy?
Are you okay?
Yes, I'm fine. Who are you?
I was very worried about you, Luis. I thought surely something must have happened to you. We thought. Perhaps Luis fell down the stairs and broke his legs. Or perhaps Luis's car caught fire while Luis was inside. Or perhaps Luis's fingers were cut off by gardening shears and he could not use the telephone any longer. You never know when an accident may befall.
What's this about?
My name is Miguel Garcia. I work for Don Delgado. Consider me like an account manager. I maintain relationships with Senor Delgado's clients.
Luis's breath froze in his throat, and his heart plummeted to his feet. He didn't know what to say and stared dumbly at the well-groomed man standing before him. The corners of Miguel's lips curled up in a malevolent smile.
You do not seem so happy to see me. You are not difficult to find. This is only Tecate, after all. Don Delgado asked me to call upon you. He is worried about your well-being, and you know why he is worried, don't you?
Sí.
Miguel placed one hand on Luis's chest and pushed him gently backwards from the doorway into the hall entrance.
May I have your permission to enter?
Yes, please.
Gracias. I feel like a Bible salesman standing at your door for so long.
Miguel led Luis through the apartment as if he had been there before, and sat him down at a dining table. His eyes dropped down and fell upon Miguel's white-spotted snakeskin cowboy boots. Luis had placed wagers with Don Delgado's bookies, wagers he lost and could not pay back. The most sensible thing Luis could think of was to bet again with the bookies, and use those winnings to pay back his previous losses. He had a tip on the Cortez Silva middleweight bout. Cortez would pull a TKO in the 9th round. His tip turned out to be bad. Silva landed an uppercut that knocked Cortez over the ropes in the first. Luis then owed much more. He approached Don Delgado full of bluster and promises. He was a hard worker, he said. He could make mucho dinero and pay Don back very soon. Senor Delgado had nodded at that and added, with interest, of course. But instead, he fled and hid. Luis moved secretly to live with a friend and never repaid a peso. He feared this day might arrive, and the day did not leave him long in waiting.
I'm working on getting the money to pay back Don Delgado soon. I swear. I just need more time.
Shh, Luis. Don Delgado is not worried about that. He knows he will get his money from you. He is only worried about your health. If you should vanish again or have an accident, he would like to feel more secure knowing he is protected.
Miguel opened his denim jacket and pulled out a set of documents, folded and bound under 2 binder clips. The papers were carefully opened, laid out before Luis, and a slender gold ballpoint pen set on top. Luis swallowed instinctively as he read the heading, Life Insurance Policy.
And if you will sign where indicated, you may feel gratified, knowing we value you at $500,000 American dollars.
Luis felt himself breathing faster and harder, tendrils of cold alarm seeping, wrapping his senses. He touched the policy immediately, noting that Senor Dominique Delgado was the sole beneficiary.
Please, Senor Garcia, I don't think this is necessary.
It's not an option. Please sign on the lines where notated.
The policy was already filled out, including Luis's personal information neatly typed in and followed by a signed notary's stamp. The policy was backdated to 3 months earlier. Luis pointed that out to Miguel with a shaky finger.
It is only a little oversight. Mi hermana is the agent, so she will have all the dates corrected. You needn't worry at all, amigo. She is very good at what she does.
Miguel leaned in close, and Luis could smell the slight tang of habaneros on his breath. He took the ballpoint pen off the policy and forced it into Luis's hand. As he crouched to do so, Luis saw his denim jacket brush open and reveal the black grip of a Magnum revolver. Luis whimpered and shook his head.
No me jodas. I can make this much worse for you.
Luis was not a violent man, but he was brash and young, and a panic took hold for fear of his life. He abruptly swung the ballpoint pen in his hand and plunged it directly into Miguel's eye, thrusting it so deep that only the gold band of the rear cartridge remained sticking out, and Miguel fell backwards, his face a paralyzed cartoon with jaws wide apart and tongue lolling out. He died immediately. The pen rose from his deflated left eye, like a crooked nail driven in almost to its head. The pen had passed through the socket and neatly plunged into the brain's delicate frontal lobe. A viscous trail of blood and aqueous humor fluid leaked out. Luis stared at the body for too long. He then quickly packed his meager possessions and loaded them, along with the limp corpse, into Miguel's car, which he found parked outside the alley. He buried Miguel in the desert, just outside of Tecate, and fled to America, never to return to the homeland of his birth. Luis remembered all this as it had occurred. He now stared at himself in the bathroom mirror and splashed water across his face, expecting the one-eyed corpse of Miguel Garcia to seize him from the other side of the glass. He had buried Miguel deep in the sandy desert outside Tecate. There had been only saguaro cacti and scorpions for witnesses of the internment. Yet now in Portero, his body, which should be freshly festering, appeared as a skeletal mummy, nearly in Luis's hands. Chupacabra or not, Joe was right when he said that strange things were transpiring here.
It's nice to get some extra time off.
Yeah.
You should have stayed with us at the grill. Manny and I scored double dates with the two waitresses there. That could have been you instead of Manny. His date is only going because mine asked her to. I'm sure she would have preferred you. She's a fine little mamacita. You know, the one with the dark blonde hair?
Sure.
Hey, Luis, snap out of it, Colonel. You've been moping around since that body was found. Did it really bother you that much? It was probably just a transient or something. An old vato without any family.
You're right. I shouldn't let it get to me.
Speaking of family, how's yours? Tia Lupe was always a favorite. You should call them.
No. I'm going to send money anyway, but I didn't really leave on good terms. I need some time to pass. Let things cool over, ¿sabes?
Sí, claro. If you need to talk, my door is next to yours.
They finished eating and sat watching the small television. Newscasters spoke in monotone, feigning interest in politics and business. The air conditioner creaked on, and a sad hum sang through the small apartment. Luis was grateful for Joe's benefaction. He had appeared unexpectedly at Joe's doorstep last month, and Joe took him in with a warm, "Mi casa es su casa." He fed Luis and helped him get hired on to harvest with him. Luis wanted desperately to tell Joe everything. The skeleton in his closet had let itself out. and Luis did not know how to put it back inside. 2 days later, the strawberry farm reopened, and the laborers went back to work. Luis felt apprehensive about returning to the fields, so close to where Miguel's body had mysteriously appeared. However, his first thought was that it might appear suspicious if he were suddenly to flee. Besides, he also thought there was some logical reason the corpse emerged at the farm anyway, and he chided himself for being superstitious. After all, the two cities were only 4 miles apart across the national border. Perhaps coyotes had dug up the decaying man and dragged him along, feasting on the flesh as they moved in pack. Perhaps sandstorms relocated it. Perhaps immigrants crossing illegally were using it as a dupe to draw attention from where they traveled. Luis was creative and could imagine a dozen reasons and scenarios, although he admitted to each as being ridiculously unlikely. The harvesters arrived in the morning on foot and in dusty pickup trucks. They spoke of their adventures during the time off, of ball games and novias. Their conversation eventually turned to the chupacabra. Another goat had been found dead and drained, and one of the men had gone missing during the night. Some ventured the chupacabra was involved with the disappearance, while others spoke that the man simply found a better opportunity elsewhere. Such was the life of a migratory farmhand. Luis and the others spread out into the field, each claiming his own lot of land like homesteaders on a prairie. The early morning sun rose high in the sky, and the land simmered underneath. Luis sweated and toiled, and the hours passed. He tried not to let his mind drift away. He focused on the fruit at hand, picking each strawberry grimly. But he imagined Miguel Garcia leaning over him at every moment.
An eye for an eye.
The morning melted away, and eventually the men broke for lunch. Luis and Joe sat under a faded vinyl awning with Manny.
Ay, chinga, it's hot out here today.
Manny was huskier than the other men, and his shirt soaked in pools of perspiration.
And I thought Tecate was hot.
At least there's a breeze blowing out there. Up here, we just cook like churros.
I don't know how much longer I can work out here on the farm.
It'll get easier. Your body is growing accustomed.
It's a good job. Work is hard to come by right now.
I know, but I've been having these nightmares about the fields.
It's the dead man we found. Luis was spooked by it.
I've seen dead men before, but this one was unexpected. Maybe it's the superstitions I hear from others, I don't know.
But as he spoke, he did know. What he could not say was that his fear grew, a horrible suspicion he had not seen the last of Miguel Garcia.
Death is unexpected, mi amigo. Whether you believe in God, or the chupacabra, or whatever else, something will come for us when it's our time. We pull strawberries from the ground. We don't think about each one, so we just pick them because it's our job to do. We pull fruit from the soil, one after the other, and when the time comes, something will pluck us from our lives just the same.
After lunch, Luis returned to his patch of crops, crouching down on numb hands and knees, working to fill another bushel. He crawled from plant to plant, dragging the bushel after him. The temperature crawled too, mimicking him as it dragged ever hotter. Minute by minute, the heat seemed to increase. Sweat formed on his brow and dripped over the strawberries as he picked them, forming wet, glistening sparkles that flashed like silky pricks of light. He found the sparkles mesmerizing, and allowed himself to drift away on their gleams, dreaming of his younger years. Luis caught a glimpse of something in the strawberry fields far from him, watching. It was distant and not more than a dark shadow, fuzzy under the sun, with spines that swayed like summer grass upon its back. The creature appeared to crouch, but that it had the ability to stand upright. Two dark eyes glowed like briquettes of fiery charcoal, gazing intently upon Luis. The other workers in the field toiled diligently, all with heads bowed deep and filling their own bushels, unaware of the specter's presence. Luis's sweat turned cold. He blinked and rubbed unbelieving eyes, and the shadow beast was still there, tense and crouching, prepared to pounce should he dare look away. Luis would not dare. He locked sight with the thing and started to rise from the ground.
No.
A wiry vine sprung from the strawberry patch and wrapped around his wrist, yanking him quickly back to the dirt. He shouted in surprise, and another stalk, this one sprouting many leaves, thrust into his mouth, choking him as it climbed down the back of his throat. Luis threw himself backwards with all his might, tearing the vines out of the ground and coughing the leaves from his mouth before screaming in panic. The other harvesters dropped the fruit of their labor and ran to Luis, expecting him to have found another corpse. Instead, he stood merely gasping and shaking his head.
What is it?
Something attacked me. It choked me.
Luis spit out a thistle from his tongue and pointed to where the shadow had watched him.
There's something over there, beyond that patch.
Several of the men went to investigate, and shook their heads quietly when discovering nothing but guiltless plants. The field foreman shuffled over, a sunburned old farmer with a gut set to burst the seams of his breeches.
What's going on here? You didn't find another rotter, did you?
There's something in the strawberries. It grabbed me.
Luis held up his wrist, encircled with a scarlet-colored welt like the imprint of a hangman's noose. The foreman was not impressed.
Sonny, I think you're getting the heat stroke. Why don't you take a rest over yonder?
He pointed to the exact spot where Luis had seen the shadow creature watching him. Luis startled and surprised at the foreman's proposed resting area. Why had he told him to go there? There were no trees or other shade at that location to suggest any place of respite. He looked incredulously at the foreman, searching for a sign he was in on some master plot to entrap him. The foreman stared back, balking under Luis's accusing glare.
No. You terminate. I'm done. I'm out of here.
You don't get paid for half days, Sonny.
Hey, carnal, wait up.
I'm sorry, Joe. I'm leaving. I'm leaving Portero. I never should have brought my troubles to you.
What troubles? It's great to have my little primo stay with me.
Gracias, Joe. You've been great to me, really, but I can't stay here anymore.
Are you going back home?
Dios, no. I've got to get further away.
Will you wait to leave until I get home tonight? We can talk some more.
See, I'll still be there. See you back at the apartment.
Luis finished packing. He did not claim ownership to much. Just a dented beige suitcase and a couple duffel bags filled with clothes and personal effects. He had some money saved from working in the fields, too. It would pay for bus fare and several nights at cheap motels. He decided to leave in the morning. Thoughts of his future roamed feral through Luis's mind, the bleak prospects of running ever further away. He had no destination to strive for, knowing only that Portero was too close to Tecate. He vaguely decided he'd follow the coastline as it sprawled northward, away from the heat and the nightmares incurred by Don Delgado. Someday, he thought, he would be far enough away from Tecate that he would settle down and start his own familia. Something dropped on Luis's head and bounced off, landing with a spongy thud. He looked down and cringed. A single heart-shaped strawberry lay on its side, sprouting a small green crest of leaves. He looked up to the ceiling in alarm, then around the room, finding nothing out of sorts. He cautiously walked out the bedroom and down the short hallway into the living room. It was empty. The entire apartment was empty. Maybe the strawberry had gotten flung up by him as he packed. He could think of no other explanation. Luis began to turn back and stepped on another strawberry. It flattened under his foot in a wet smoosh. He looked down and saw several more of the fruit lying scattered across the floor like ruby turds.
Que diablos?
His heartbeat quickened, and he felt a tingle claw up his spine. He paused, sensing the room around him, waiting for another strawberry to fall or mystically appear. He stood there some minutes, eventually almost feeling disappointed in the anticlimax of events. He tensed in anticipation and found himself still holding his breath. Luis sighed and tried to relax. His head throbbed with a dull migraine ache, and he swore at his fright. He caused himself a headache from his nerves. He and Joe brought home strawberries every day. One of them must have just knocked over a bowl of the fruit as they passed by. Still, Luis would not feel safe until he was on the bus, out of town. Walking back down the hallway toward the bedrooms, Luis turned into the side bathroom to get a bottle of Tylenol.
No. No!
You left something back in Tecate.
Miguel Garcia was climbing out of the mirror. His face gleamed with red streaks, a cocktail of blood and strawberry juice. The gold pen stuck jauntily out from one eye. He held up the life insurance policy and grinned. Maggots squirmed between his teeth.
You do not seem so happy to see me. You are not difficult to find, Luis. This is only hell, after all.
Miguel reached up to his face and grasped the pen, pulling it out of his eye with a sickening hiss, like a deflating tire. He offered it generously to Luis.
El Chupacabra asked me to call upon you. He would like for you to join us in the strawberry fields.
Luis turned and ran to the front door. He flung it open but froze just before passing through. The door opened to a dark land of strawberry fields stretching endlessly to the horizon and then curling impossibly upwards into the black sky, as if looking up at the crest of a wave about to crash down. The fruit plants were large and full and alive. They rustled about on the ground, scratching into the soil. Corpses of livestock littered the strawberry-infested land. Rotting skeletal carrion of cows and sheep lay on their backs with stumps of severed limbs pointing askew in all directions. The animal husks were shriveled and dry, drained of fluid. The weedy fruit covered the carcasses, sucking up their moisture, so the strawberries grew plump in fresh vitality.
An eye for an eye.
Luis looked again through the door into the strawberry fields and sank to his knees. He saw a dark shadow peering at him from the distance, the same fuzzy image he had seen watching him at the farm. The distant black shape crouched in the field, preparing to pounce. It looked as if an etching of charcoal was brushed across the horizon, with black eyes like saucers of ink, glaring in judgment upon him. Luis knew then the Chupacabra for what it was.
Aquí hay el diablo. 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 Aquí hay el diablo.
That evening, Joe arrived home to find Luis missing. He tapped on the bedroom door and it opened with a slow creak from the push of his finger. He saw the packed luggage stacked in the corner, so did not worry immediately at his cousin's absence. What struck him as odd, however, was the single plump strawberry set on top of his pillow. Joe shrugged it off. He sat on the couch and ate dinner and watched television. Hours later, Joe felt drowsy, even while thoughts began to worry at where Luis could have gone for such a long time. He wrote a note for Luis to wake him and say goodbye before leaving, then laid down on the couch to rest. He quickly fell to sleep and dreamt a terrifying vision. The night was black, an unworldly sky with no stars or moon to interrupt the darkness. Around him, strawberry plants crouched and hissed in warning. Joe knew this was a land in which the living were not to traverse. He heard moans and sounds of rustling nearby, and his dream body led him to the commotion, seemingly against his will. Joe sensed he must flee, but there appeared nowhere to abscond. The land was strawberries, all strawberries, growing wicked in the sunless soil. As he drew closer, a mound appeared before him, writhing in shudders. The fruit vines coiled and grew over a figure that Joe recognized immediately. Luis. Joe leapt to him. He reached through the crawling flora and grasped Luis's hand, pulling it quickly. Luis's hand plucked free like a loose tooth popping from the gum line. Joe looked down, and the hand became into a cluster of fresh strawberries on leafy vine. Luis thrashed behind him and let out a choked wail. He squirmed and kicked under the strawberries. Joe frantically reached through the plants again and grabbed hold of Luis's leg, trying to drag him out from the suffocating mound. The leg tore free, and Joe fell backwards holding a thick bush extract. It was a long plant with the biggest, reddest fruit yet, trailing dirty tangled roots back down to the ground. He somehow found the strength to clamber back into the strawberry patch, but as more plants grew over him, Luis could hardly be seen any longer. He gradually became a fluttering mass as if the wind blew through a pasture of wildflowers. Joe could see his cousin's face last as it vanished, peering from under the fruit. His staring eyes turned bright red with pupils of yellow seeds, glazing over as they ripened. Something then came toward Joe across the field. He saw the shadow approaching, and looking up, screamed again. It was the chupacabra, and it rose above him, towering high, the guardian of the strawberry fields. As it came closer, Joe saw its face resembled a coyote's with snarling, pointed snout. Spines protruded venomously from its back like a porcupine, and its eyes glowed burning black. It spoke an incantation, and Joe woke shrieking. He bounded from the couch and went to Luis's room again to check if he had come back yet. The room remained empty. The lone strawberry on his pillow glared ominously at Joe, and he could see each yellow seed as a vision of Luis's fading eyes. Joe snatched the strawberry and hurled it against the wall. It splattered into soft, wet chunks that slowly slipped down the wall, leaving red streaks like the trail of a dying snail. The fruit pieces landed on a set of papers, bound with a paperclip, lying atop a small table. Joe picked up the papers and stared at them in dread. It was a life insurance policy, speckled in drops of dark red. Whether the red drops were stains from a strawberry or were dried blood, Joe thought he did not ever want to know. Joe never returned to work in the strawberry fields. He left Portero, telling no one of his fears. A month later, the harvesters found another body buried underneath the strawberry plants. It was unidentifiable. The corpse was drained like the others and withered to a sun-beaten mummy, as if it had lain in the desert for many, many years. Had Joe been there, he would have known immediately who it was. And the fruit crop flourished that season. People remarked that the strawberries had never grown so plump or tasted so juicy before. They said it must be something in the fields.
Poor Luis. He thought the chupacabra would kill him. Instead, it turned him into strawberry jam. Speaking of picking off, let's check in with our harvest chambers, shall we? What's behind door number 1? Running along nicely. How about door number 2? Rigor mortis, my old friend. And finally, door number 3. Uh-oh. Get back in there, Grandpa. You're not ripe enough. Who said harvesting was easy? I hope you enjoyed tonight's tale. Until the next one, won't you stay the night